Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Chris Vandegrift. He's worked in the quality field for a number of years, and I'm really glad to have him on to share more about how he came to quality, how public speaking has benefited him, and why other technical professionals should consider getting better at speaking. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Chris.
Good morning, Neil. Thank you very much for having me on.
You got it. So, from the bit of research I did on you, I saw that you studied mechanical engineering. What was the motivation to study that?
The motivation to study that was, I guess, twofold, as embarrassing as it might be. Um, I was looking for a degree that didn't involve a foreign language, and I was building decks and barns. I was working at a lumber yard, and so that's what I did to make money on the side in my teenage years. And so mechanical engineering just appealed to me because it related to what I was doing at the time.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. You're probably the first person I've had on the podcast who at least mentioned that they built decks and barns. That's pretty cool.
My dad taught me all this stuff when I was a kid. Everything was about doing it yourself and trying to avoid paying other people to have to do it. And, that was what we needed to do in order I like scuba diving. So that
Oh,
made all the money in order to buy the equipment.
okay, that's smart. I was curious. Okay, you like scuba diving? What's that got to do with decks and barns? Okay, I see it now.
Yeah, I'll get there eventually.
Gotcha. But I also saw that you got an MBA as well. What was the motivation to do an MBA?
The motivation for that was working at the electric utility company at the time in the late 80s and 90s. The impression was you didn't have to justify anything. You always got all your money for free, basically. So the business world didn't recognize the talents of the engineer. And so I looked at that and said, well, if I've got the MBA, then I can show them all the things I already know, because we had to do all of this work to justify every single improvement we made in the power plant. And so I had the knowledge, but nobody believed I did. So I opted for the degree to give me the credentials to go with the experience.
Gotcha. When you were talking, Chris, I know you'd said that I think you mentioned working in utilities, but when you were in undergrad and you're finishing your degree, did you have any idea on what type of on what field you wanted to work in, or what you wanted to do with your mechanical engineering degree, or did you just kind of fall into what you fell into?
It's a little bit of both in that I wanted to do the heat transfer, thermodynamics kind of thing. The utility company job, I used everything in my engineering degree. And that actually, I got that job because of the decks and barns construction. I had the interview. The co-op coordinator was telling me you'll never get a really good job because you just don't have a great GPA. At the time, until I got my co-op job, I was barely pulling like a 2.7. And the guy in the interview said, well, how much would it cost me to build a deck on the back of my house? And I was actually able to give him an estimate right there in the interview. And in the end, that's actually what got me hired for the job. He's like, you can think on your feet. You really know what you're doing. So I was able to communicate real well with the side job and what he was looking for in an engineer to work in the plants. And so I ended up landing that job, and I found, oh my gosh, I'm using all this stuff they're teaching me in school. And my GPA went up. I ended up with like a 3.5 by the time I was done, because I could see the interest. It's like, okay, this is what I'm going to keep doing. And I went from the co-op at the utility company right into the job.
That is so interesting, Chris, because I think you're right. A lot of us, we go through school, and especially if you don't do any sort of internship or co-op, you start to think, what's the applicability of all this stuff that we're learning in school? And until you realize what that is, it's the information seems so abstract. And and I think a lot of people that do engineering, they figure that out. It's only until they start working do they think, oh, okay, this is why I learned this. Yeah,
Yeah, and in that case, I was able to, in the interview, figure out what the interviewer was looking for and then actually get that information to him. And, kind of the premise behind our conversation here, I start thinking about it. It started there. I learned about coming up with my elevator speech when I was working in the marketing department at the utility company. Yeah. You should be prepared to tell somebody about yourself and the time it takes you to go up in the elevator to your floor, 30 seconds or less.
yeah, that's helpful. Just being able to be clear and brief about what you do within an organization to anyone who wants to know. That definitely can be quite helpful. 100%, and I'm a big fan of that. Also from the bit of research I did on you, Chris, I saw that you studied, well, you eventually got into the quality field. So what was the I guess the motivation to go into quality?
My sister did a lot of statistics stuff, and we used to have this banter back and forth because they called her an engineer, and she had this statistics degree. And I had a lot of stuff going on at the utility analyzing data, and I was trying to figure out a better way to convince people to do the projects that I thought were going to be valuable. And she started teaching me some of the Six Sigma stuff that she knew. And I applied that in the utility. I ended up getting picked up by GE Lighting because of the work that I was doing in the quality type of field, but I didn't know it was that at the time. And that ended up drawing me right into quality because I got hired on at GE as a black belt. And on day one, I was expected to understand all of this. And I had to jump in and find some classes and start learning and really got into it. Started realizing that the quality element was really the beginning of everything. So if you wanted to go fix some of the day-to-day firefighting that you had to do, if you dug back into the quality issues, you could start figuring that out and solve problems.
Nice. I worked in medical devices and product development, and I used to work with quality people, and I thought to myself, this is the most what's the best way to put this? This is the most boring job you could possibly have.
And I thought the opposite because, see, I like playing in everybody's sandbox. And in the quality field, one of the reasons I stayed and really got enamored with it was because I could work on all kinds of different things. I didn't always have to work on one project, and it wasn't necessarily something that I was an expert in. So I was always learning something and I was trying to figure out the relationships, and I became a process expert. So I'm really a process improvement expert at this point in time.
Okay, so yeah, you can look at how something is running and think, how could we do this better?
Yep. Why does it run this way? Why do we do this? That question comes up all the time.
How do you
Why,
go?
why is it done this way? And sometimes people know, and sometimes they go, I came into it. This is the way we've always done it,
Right.
and it works. Okay, well, can we make it better?
How do you convince people to make changes? Because I guess sometimes people can be resistant to change.
What's in it for them? I try and look at what is it that they need? What drives them? What goals do they have? Because I need to appeal to that element of their psyche in order to move a project forward.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Understand your customer. They are truly a customer when So I'm being a salesman an awful lot. I've got an idea, I've got an improvement, I need money for that, whether it's capital or expense dollars, or I need people support. It goes right after the question that you're asking. How do you get them to have that same commitment that you've got to the fix?
Are you a manager of people now?
I am.
As a manager of people, what's one thing that you didn't anticipate before you became one?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I think for me, the hardest thing has always been that they don't always want me to solve their problem. So I was always a problem solver. And if you came into my office and you threw something out there that was a challenge, I was always coming up with a solution for you. That's not what most people want. Some people, yep, you need a hand, you're stuck. But what I found was that I needed to be able to step back from this just natural instinct I have to be the one who came up with the problem to how can I facilitate you solving your own problem?
How do you determine whether they want a solution or they don't?
I think that's really tough. I think that comes more out of experience with the people on your team. You know, you do learn very much how everybody is different and getting to know some folks, building some trust, sometimes being able to just ask up front, what are you looking for here? What do you hope to accomplish? Can help. More often than not, though, I feel like it comes down to understanding the person and what they're looking for. Because as soon as you make it so blatant to say, what are you looking for? As I've gotten into the executive level, I won't get an honest answer to that question anymore.
Hmm. Why? Why do you think that is?
There's I think there's always that trepidation that you're going to judge them. I have a philosophy that I introduce to all of my folks when I take on a new team, and I call it the virtual couch. And the virtual couch is so that you know there's a safe zone where you can come in and all you want to do is you are frustrated and you're going to complain. And I'm not going to judge you when you leave. I tell them I won't remember a thing you said. I will not judge. I will not take first impressions, nothing. It's just your time to vent. If you come in and say, Chris, I just need to use the virtual couch, I know that you're totally frustrated with somebody or something, and you need to be able to vent. And if you get a solution or something comes out of that, great. Some people just need to talk through things. Like this was part of learning the people that work for you. There are folks out there that if they just start rambling on, they're really giving you all this background information. What they're truly doing is they're actually trying to solve their problem. And as they talk about it out loud, they'll come up with solutions and they'll leave going, oh, that was super successful. And I didn't do anything but listen.
Imagine that. You know what? I think that has to do with personality styles, because yeah, I think you're right. There definitely are people out there that like to think out loud, and they need somebody to listen to them do that. And certainly there are other people who, well, they don't do that. All their thinking is done in their head, and then they reveal it when it's time to reveal it. Yeah, for sure. 100%. Okay. So also as a leader of people, how important do you think it is for a leader to have effective communication skills?
Oh, that's super important. And that comes up. I've been doing this 40 years and it still comes up to this day. And it doesn't matter at what level. I'm working with plant managers, and it wasn't too long ago that one of my plant managers said, I did not think I was responsible for this. And I said, I thought I was very clear that you were responsible for this. So it still happens. And it's about I've done a lot more summarizing. Okay, here's the key things that I think are takeaways that we need to accomplish at the end of a meeting. That was something I found that I wasn't doing. I just thought, hey, we've been sitting here talking for half an hour. You know exactly what to do. Well, we talked about a lot of things in that half an hour, as it turns out. And maybe we bantered back and forth about how to accomplish something, and they had a completely different takeaway than I did.
You're 100% correct. I'm thinking about communication, and people just think it's just, well, you say something and then someone listens to what you say, but it's way more complicated than that, I think, because you have your intent on what you say, and then the people that are listening have their whatever filters they have in their mind as to what you said, and you just hope that your intent and what they actually took in match up as best as possible. So you don't get that
Yep.
person, that your subordinate thinking, I didn't know that I was going to be responsible for that, and you're thinking, well, I thought I was very clear you're responsible for that. And now if you want to complain about it, come sit on the virtual couch.
Let pull it together. Yep.
Nice.
I had an interesting experience a couple of months ago that I think I can actually link to this thought too, because one of our tech guys, he is using a artificial intelligence program to take notes in meetings. And I didn't know that till after this first meeting with him. And it had occurred to me during the meeting, he was asking questions and he was restating things in a very specific way, making sure he called out people's names and what they were doing and summarizing things, similar to what I was doing in meetings at this point, but very, very focused. And then after the fact, he sends out the notes from the meeting and it's generated by his AI bot. And it's like, holy cow, I was basically in the meeting. But now I learned why he was saying things the way he was. It was because the bot knew to listen for certain key phrases he was using and names, and it was then giving the bulletized action item list.
Smart.
So it's just interesting the way using something that was supposed to help you cut down on your time actually, I think, helped him manage the meeting and get people to leave with a clearer understanding of what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. So now it's more difficult for that person to say, I didn't know that I was going to be responsible for that. Actually, the notes say you're responsible for that.
And the notes were generated right after the meeting. You didn't wait a day. You didn't wait 2 days because they got busy or distracted.
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. Chris, when I started this podcast, it had to do with my own struggles giving presentations in front of management. I wasn't very good at it, but I got a lot better at it over time. And I was really keen to listen to the stories of other people that had technical jobs, or at least, technical backgrounds, as to what they did to get better at giving presentations. When it comes to yourself, were you always good at public speaking? And if not, what'd you do to get better at it?
I was horrible at public speaking. I'm a storyteller. I wander off on tangents all the time. I couldn't get the right point across to people. I was definitely struggling with it. And the change came at Johnson and Johnson when I worked at Ethicon Endosurgery. They were investing in our ability to do some good communication, and I got to take a class on presentation skills, and I've done that in college, and I did that when I was at the utility company, and none of it ever seemed to help. And the woman who was the instructor had been Peter Pan on Broadway. And for whatever reason, her approach to it, the things that she taught us, really were applicable. She talked a lot about stage presence and how to project your voice and to script some things out and to be prepared. So for those of us that, like me, I do a little bit of storytelling, scripting things out became very valuable. That kept me on task and also helped me decide, okay, what am I trying to do here? And every slide needs to be like turning the page in the book. So She wanted us to get people to anticipate, oh, what comes next? Oh, what's going to happen next?
That's an
That one has
interesting.
stuck with me, and I've just used everything she taught me for 2 decades now.
Wow. That's a great way to look at it. Kind of, yeah, presentation kind of like a story, and the next slide is the next page in the book, and then by the end of the presentation, you got and everyone lived happily ever after.
And nobody has to go to the virtual couch.
Yeah. Stay off the virtual couch for a minute. No question. When you give presentations, do you have a process for putting them together? And if so, what is it?
I do, and we covered a little bit of it. I like to get some of the key points down first. I really want to lay out, okay, what am I going to talk about? And then I'm going to expand on each of those. And I do just a stream of consciousness kind of thing. Let's just jot down everything I can think about associated with this, whatever topic, whatever bullet point it is. And then I'll start to pare that down based on what's the outcome. So I've got my topics. Then I fill out all the information that I know on those topics associated with the presentation. Then I go to, okay, what is the objective? What do I want to get out of this? Now go back to the information that I generated, and let's pull out the salient points related to the end game.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a useful process. And again, the reason I asked that is that typically, well, when I first started giving presentations, I had no process. I was slapping slides together. I was reading those slides. I was trying to get out of the meetings as quickly as possible. I had to give monthly meetings in front of senior management on project status updates, and those first few presentations, Chris, were rough at best, to say the least.
I've lived that for sure.
Yeah, man. I was giving these presentations and I'm trying to get out of there, but I get these questions afterwards that I thought I had answered during the presentation, but apparently I didn't, because now I'm getting these questions, and if I was sweating before, now it's coming down by the boatload.
I think that's a great observation for people as well. If you get questions afterwards and your first response is, I told you that, you know what? Your presentation was not effective.
100%.
Instead of defending yourself, you got to challenge yourself and say, what do I need to do different?
Yep.
I like that thought.
Yeah, for sure. Do you ever get nervous before you give a presentation? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
I do get nervous before presentations, and I probably don't deal with them well at all because I don't address it. I just keep moving forward like a bull in the china shop. It's like, okay, I've got everything laid out. I've got the presentation, and the nerves show up in me trying to stick with the topic. So I just have to, do that cycle where go back to the fact you're prepared. You've got the information here. You're ready to go. You've maybe talked to others to find out what the questions could be that come up. And now I'm ready to go. Yeah. There's nothing else to it than that. Like, I don't try and get rid of that. I just kind of feed off of it, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when it comes to nerves, they're natural to have, and they're just a sign that you care about the outcome of the presentation. I mean, if you don't have any nerves, you probably don't care a whole lot, and that's not good. I mean, what are you giving the presentation for? But yeah, I think when it comes down to it, having them is normal, and just being able to make it so that you're not this shaking leaf in front of these people. I think that can be helpful. Just sweating buckets. That's not helpful either. People be looking at you thinking, "Does this guy? What's wrong with this dude?" For sure. Yeah. If you had to give one tip to the people who are listening or watching this conversation as to why getting better at public speaking would be of benefit to them, what would it be?
Oh, I think public speaking is a benefit because it drives your personal development. It gives you that opportunity to achieve. You can't I always share this with my kids. You're not going to get something if you don't ask. Well, the presentation is about asking, and you're out there developing, trying to figure out a way to make things better for others. And so you're also making things better for yourself as you get that development, that sense of personal accomplishment.
Yep. You don't get if you don't ask. You know, it's funny you mentioned that, Chris. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a woman that I used to work with a few years ago. She was a patent attorney, but before that, she worked as an engineer, and she thought, and this was back in the 70s, so she's much older than me. She's probably around my mother's age. So this is in the 70s. She's working as an engineer, one of her first jobs out of school, and she thought that if she did a good job, that people would notice and that she would get promotions and pay raises because of it. And then when she realized that wasn't the case, she became quite frustrated. But then I remember telling her, well, just because you're doing a good job doesn't mean other people are noticing. I mean, they have their own jobs that they're doing, and they're hoping other people notice them too. And if everyone just is doing their job, thinking everybody else is just paying attention to them, they're in for a rude awakening. You don't get that kind of attention, that kind of visibility, unless you're able to communicate it with other people. I mean, you also have to think it's rather arrogant to even think that. Why should everyone be concerned with you? Like other people work here.
Right. And you're going to learn something out of that as well, because you may find out that, okay, the company doesn't value that. I say that in kind of a loose definition of the word value. Was it important, right? Should you be spending your time doing something else? And maybe should what you're doing be a little different because you're not quite meeting the customer's needs? So you, I think, are going to get something out of that. I've had people talk with me like, oh, I don't want to promo myself. It's not this self-aggrandizing thing. I'm like, you can't think about it that way. You have to think more like you were talking about there, you know?
Yeah. I think that was another issue she had. She just thought it was bragging to talk about the things that you're doing, but it's just like, no, it's just you making other people aware about the things that you're doing because they're not paying attention to you like that. I mean, they're concerned with their own selves and their own development and progression within the organization. So if you want people's attention, you're gonna have to say something.
Yeah,
100%.
totally agree.
This has been a great conversation, Chris. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Neil, they can find me on LinkedIn under Chris Vandegrift, and they can also find me through American Society for Quality. I'm in the Cincinnati section.
Excellent.
So on myasq.com.
All right. Well, again, everyone, my name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. With Teach the Geek, I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Neil.